We are developing an exhibit on Nanaimo Roads at the Nanaimo Museum.
The stories aren't necessarily connected to each other, so that might give you some more flexibility in how you line up what order you'd like your stories to be in. You're less constraints, I think.
We're getting a real taste of what Nanaimo is from the past. We're really getting to see how it grew and how it expanded and how it became what it is today.
So our broad topic is Nanaimo Roads, and the students initially, it's a very broad topic, and initially that caused quite a bit of anxiety. I think now they're starting to realize that that challenge is also a strength in the sense that they have a lot of choice about the direction that they take the exhibit.
How the roads were used for mining, rather, right? Focused on like the idea that how Nanaimo grew out of that, and it became something else from that.
Yeah.
This exhibit, I'm finding, helps us to understand the history of Nanaimo, and when we look at the roads today that are like funny, like Jingle Pot or Dingle Bingle Hill, we can kind of understand why they are the way they are.
Wiggly was one of them, and Mayor Frank Ney, his daughter Monique, was very skinny as a child, and her nickname was Twiggy. And they used to go on these very nice ski trips to a former mountain that's no longer in existence. And along the way, it was quite windy, and apparently she was very wiggly, so that's where that name came from, and I like the community connection.
The road that I studied was Labio Road, and here at Diver Lake we're not too far from Labio Road today. Labio was a Belgian miner, and he originally came to Canada in the late 1800s. Along Labio, before the developments, there was a lot of open space, and I assume that is where Labio spent a lot of his time farming.
There's a lot of talk about how roads build the city and connect people.
I feel like the community is a huge aspect of this exhibit. It's where people are living on Jingle Pot, on Twiggly Wiggly, and other cool names.
So I reached out to the museum initially just to have someone come in and talk about how is it that you get to work in a museum? What does that look like? Amy is a VIU graduate of the history program, so that connection is really natural, right? And she can say, well, this was my classroom, and now I work at the museum.
What are your learning outcomes? So what you're saying, Katharine, what do you want people, what are the top two things? What is the number one thing? What do you want people to leave with?
The idea of collaborating on an exhibit, I think, came from the museum. Amy said, in addition to coming to the classroom, we're happy to have the students come in and do something more hands-on.
Getting involved with the amount of records, both textual records and photographs and maps that are contained in the Nanaimo Community Archives. It's so fascinating, and being able to interact with them to contribute to the exhibit has been a very rewarding experience.
So my job is to kind of liaise between Amy and Jordan Johns, the exhibit technician at the museum, and the students.
And they're slightly different based on the institution. Our standard here is 60 inches from the ground to the center of the piece.
We're always really excited to work with students from VIU because they bring fresh perspectives to local history, and we're looking forward to seeing how the public interacts with their exhibit. Hear some of the discussions that guests to the museum have with each other while they're reading the content. Hear some of the questions that they have for museum staff to learn more about the topics.
So the research and the writing is a really important part of the project. The other part that's really important and is a real shift from a lot of the history classes that we teach at the university is the visual component.
It's yellow, red, and green to attract people to wonder, what is this? But stay within the theme of roads.
The students in our program are usually less comfortable or familiar with selecting images and using those images to help tell a story. And so that's something that they learn quite a bit about in the course of designing the exhibit.
Because this is a reference point where people can come and refer to all of the streets that we're talking about.
After working on this project, I started to see the value of public history, not just as a museum institution, rather as a bigger vision of how to use history to educate people in general.